All right, it is 1 o'clock and welcome to Good News in Parks. We are super excited to have you here today. And happy Earth Day, everyone. I just read some of the great things going on around the world today in the name of protecting our precious resources, including the Global Climate Summit, and encourage you to check it out after our show, of course. Check out earthday.org. There's some really good news happening there. We are so excited about this special edition. You've all been asking for a show focused on funding and foundations, so here we go. Thanks first to Lisa Clausen and Jim Errico for today's opening quotes. Please keep them coming. You've shared some amazing quotes with us, and you make it really hard to choose. Excellence is a habit, and having good leadership and support staff, though, are both excellent segues into today's show. With the explosive growth in park usage over the past year, many of us are looking for ways to fund everything from expansion to new equipment to additional programming to maintenance. You've all made it crystal clear that you want to hear from experts in funding and foundations, and I'm sure when you meet today's panel, you'll agree that they are leaders in this arena. But first, I'm going to introduce my co-host, though she needs no introduction. I'm sure you all know her. And if you haven't had the opportunity to meet her yet, you are in for a treat. Jody Adams has spent her career serving the park and rec industry in almost every capacity you can think of, including STEAM director and now a leading educator, sharing her knowledge with university students. Jody, take it away. What's today's news and who's on our panel?
Cannot wait. We've been waiting for this episode. And Anne-Marie, thank you so much. First of all, I'm going to introduce our guests, and then I'm going to go to good news, national news. So let's just start off with our panelists' introductions. Don Artell, Executive Director of National Association of Park Foundations. And Donald, thank you for joining us. You've got 25 years in the industry of nonprofits and of course of hospitality. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, and it's great to be amongst the rest of the panel.
You bet. Jeff Dancer, Senior Vice President of Field Programs, Trust for Public Lands, and has a doctorate in chemical engineering and a focus on the ecological management communications. You kind of are very humble, Jeff, when it comes to all this. Welcome to the show.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
You betcha. Elvis Cordova, Vice President of Public Policy and Advocacy for the National Recreation Park Association. And again, we have, Elvis, very humble, but I just want to say thank you for joining us, your past career with Capitol Hill, but also what an asset with your USDA experience and your undersecretary. Amazing. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Jody. It's a pleasure to be here and be with such great panelists today.
You betcha. And Todd Carlson. Todd, you and I have been together a long time. You're National Manager of Infrastructure Services, United States Tennis Association. And you were there when I was on the board of director of the USTA. And you have worked nationwide, tireless. I've watched you over a decade, work with our local communities with grants and resources. Todd, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
You bet. Okay, good news, national news. Here we are. Well, yes, it is not only Earth Day, but we have several things going on this week with the national news. We have National Volunteer Week going on all week, but that leads into specifically, we have a shout out to the National Park System. It is National Parks Week. And so any of you out there, feel free to visit our national parks free of charge. They are welcoming you through Parks RX days. They've got military days, and they have National Junior Ranger Day and much more going on right now. So hope you can go ahead and join that national park system right now. Also, little history on the Earth Day. I want to give you that Earth Day was actually developed in 1970. I can't believe it's on its 41st year. It was actually created by 20,000 people demonstrating in this country to try to end pollution and make sure that we take care of our natural resources and really clean up our country. Bottom line is Congress passed and actually created the Environmental Protection Agency this same year in December. So again, gosh, it's exciting. We're on Earth Day today. And then also another shout out to Latrice Sneed, the Chief Program Officer with the National Park Foundation. This week, I ran into an article called, and she wrote personally, Build the Inclusive Outdoors, Creating More Equitable Outdoor Space. It's a short read. It's inspiring. It continued to open my eyes, but what a candid equity look from her personal experience. National Park Foundation, they are supporting national parks. Today, we're going to talk about local parks and how the National Association of Park Foundations is helping with all these other agencies' support. So again, Latrice, thank you for continuing to open our eyes. And I hope you all will go into that article and read. And then also a huge, huge thank you. Many of the deadlines have passed for the Land and Water Conservation Funds, but this would not happen without the Department of Interior, our national park system, and a tireless, endless work of our state parks and our liaison agents that actually execute the Land and Water Conservation Fund at the local level. It is an amazing work. I've been hearing stories over the last 30 days of all these projects that are going in. But again, all of these panelists on this panel today have been supporters and have given their lives of supporting the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So couldn't be more appropriate today to have everyone on the show. And then finally, I just want to mention again, we mentioned this last show, the 2021 Playcore Game Time Funding Guide. This is for you, and this is for funding per state. Every state has some guidance on where you can find funding for your departments and your local community. So don't forget to go to playcore.com and get that free 2021 funding guide. All right, panelists, let's get started. Question number 1, here we go. As departments aggressively seek funds and resources to augment their budgets, from your national advantage viewpoint, how do you advise our field colleagues to seek and obtain these funds? And I'm going to start with you, Donald. Start us off with this question.
Well, thank you so much. And again, thanks for having the National Association of Park Foundations on the panel. It's great to be with everyone. You know, that the National Association of Park Foundations, which was founded in 2014, was not founded as a grant-making organization. And to this day, we serve still as a resource for local park foundations to help build and grow and sustain their organizations from a charitable standpoint of view, especially in the areas where at our local level, where taxpayer dollar just isn't going as far as it once used to. We do realize that our park foundations, especially at the local level, do need funding support beyond that of their geographic locations and boundaries. So we do try to provide some sense of support through the programs and the partnerships that we have. One of the things that we're most proud of is a partnership that was developed in sync with relationships between the board of the National Association of Park Foundations and our friends at Game Time and Playcore. We're really excited to be able to market to our park foundations a really needed area to help provide for access of parks to everyone. And so the Swing for Everybody campaign was developed. And what it provides is a chance for the park foundations at the local level to wrap their capital campaigns around fund development to include a expression swing in their parks where they currently don't have the taxpayer dollar to include this. The expression swings will, let's just use an average of $15,000 as far as raising money for an expression swing to be incorporated. We know through surveys that we've done and certainly through professional experiences that in any campaign, it usually seems that the last 10 or 15% of the campaign is the hardest to gain. So the National Association of Park Foundations provides the last 10% of their capital campaign. And we share that with our park foundations immediately when they launch their campaign. So on a purchase of, let's just say $15,000 equipment, we will provide up to $1,500 of that campaign to our park foundations to finish their campaign. It's called the Swing for Everybody, and we're excited to be able to provide that as a source of support to our park foundations. Another thing that is important, especially to those organizations that are members of the National Association of Park Foundations, through a partnership that we've had through one of our sponsors, we actually will provide support for a renewal membership. Now, there's some qualifications that go into that, but those are pretty much two of the programs that the NAPF is most proud of.
Well, I think it's key because, you know, you and I were talking, really, this is the main organization that's out there that's working strictly with park foundations. And again, we're going to talk about some other things that you're going to offer later in the year to really help departments. So Donald, thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Jody.
And Jeff, next up, help us out.
Thank you, Jody. And I just want to start by thanking Jody and Anne Marie and Game Time Play Corps for the invitation. And really, I just want to sit and listen to what the other panelists have to say, because this is really a great group. I feel like I should make my remarks around the public funding that is either available or coming to be available right now. Jody, you are absolutely right. In the last year, with all that's gone on in this country, parks have really had a moment. And I think public entities at all levels are really realizing the important role that parks play in our society. And that's starting to be translated into real funding that's available for park districts across the country. So let me talk about that a little bit. At the local level, in 2020, the Trust for Public Land ran 26 ballot initiatives across the country to raise funds for state and local open space and parks. For the first time in our history, 100% of those ballot initiatives passed. And to our knowledge, across the entire country, every initiative but one passed, which just goes to show that in one of the most contentious political years ever, parks are not a red or a blue issue. They are something that everybody cares about, and people are willing to vote real money into those. And so we have this window of opportunity to raise money, public money at the state and local level for parks across the country. And then at the federal level, we're seeing a kind of movement that I've never seen before in my career. So if I can just walk through these. Last year, Land and Water Conservation Fund was fully funded for the first time, which was, I don't know what you think, Elvis, but kind of a milestone in my career.
Right.
But one of the things that resulted from that was $150 million worth of funding in ORLP, the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Partnership Program. That's an enormous amount of money. It started at $3 million when that program was created. So we're working with the National Park Service to try to streamline how that money gets out to states and into on-the-ground projects, because it was pretty bureaucratic, and we think that there are ways that we can really smooth that money going out the door. The second thing I want to talk about that's currently available is something that came through the American Rescue Plan Act. There's $122 billion through something called ESSER, which is for elementary and secondary schools. Those funds can be used for playgrounds. And so to the extent that Parks Departments have joint use agreements with schools, even if we're able to peel off 1% of those school funds for schoolyards, that's $1 billion across the country that can be invested in that.
Yeah.
The next thing I want to highlight, and this one is amazing. It's the Parks Equity and Jobs Act, or PAGIA as we're calling it. There are 200 organizations around the country, including NRPA, so Elvis is working on this as well, working to move a $500 million federal appropriation for state and local parks through Congress as part of the stimulus funding that's coming down the pike. Those funds have both Republican and Democratic sponsorship in the House, and we don't really know how it's going to be included in the bigger stimulus bill. Is it standalone? We don't know, but there's some likelihood that those $500 million are going to be available to local local parks sometime in the next few months. And just to touch on a few others that are coming down the pipeline, we're looking for increases in community development block grants that can be spent for parks. We think there's going to be increases in transportation that can be spent for parks and trails. And then the final thing, earmarks are back, and which really gives local delegations that might be working with you all the ability to go out and seek funds through a variety of vehicles directly for the projects that you want to fund. So the bottom line here is there's an enormous amount of money that is currently available, and even more that might be available to kind of respond to how COVID increased the visibility and the importance of parks. Let me say just two last things. How are we responding to this? First of all, parks districts that have a relationship with a national organization that has a federal presence, a lobbying arm in DC, Trust for Public Land, NRPA, there are many others, rely on those relationships. Things are moving really fast in DC right now, and we're all trying to get that information out into your hands as soon as possible, and trying to figure out how we can help you access those things. The other thing, speaking just for the Trust for Public Land, we're hiring one, hopefully 2 grant managers in the near future to actually work with our partners in local places. Some of these proposals are really difficult, complicated to put together, and that's a service that we want to be able to offer to our partners to be able to try to get those funds right away. So I think I'll stop there, but again, I just want to say this thing's called Good News in Parks, and I feel like we do have good news, that there is funding coming, and that we're going to be able to invest that to help everybody.
You bet, Jeff. And I'll tell you, you really hit on so many areas that it's amazing how the funding is there and how it's accessible. And you all on this call are making this happen. That is why we're having this special edition. But also, I want to give a shout out to the National Association of State Outdoor Recreation Liaison Officers. Jeff, we're all working together, over and over with this group because they do represent the states. So there's just a lot of cohesion, a lot of goodwill that's happening between all of us. It's just fantastic. Elvis, turning that over to you. Go for it. Oh, you're on mute.
You figured after a year I'd be able to learn that lesson.
We all do it.
Hey, we're all been there. Join the club.
It is really exciting to be here. I've heard so much about this show, and to be here on Earth Day, it's divine intervention to be with you all with such a great panel. And really, I want to build off of what Jeff said, because I think the magic here is that we all have incredible expertise. And as we can feed off of each other, it's just a microcosm of how we are working together to really advance the opportunities for local park and rec agencies. To one point, Jeff is talking about the public appreciation that public parks have right now. And that has turned into such political goodwill that's allowing not only the Great American Outdoors Act to advance, but so many other important funding mechanisms at the federal government. However, at the local government, where I know that folks really care about accessing that money, we have those opportunities too. I think that the COVID relief legislation that has come about has provided some of those opportunities. Jeff highlights some of those great ones. And I think it's important for folks to really become comfortable with reaching out to local and state officials to make the case for parks. That during the pandemic, parks stepped up and were there for communities. And I think it's important for communities to realize that park needs them now. And we have to, as park and recreation professionals, we have to highlight the work that we took on, whether it was expanded out of school time, it was expanded meal programs, expanded healthcare, expanded transportation. All of these particular programs that were above and beyond really did strain park and recreation professionals and their budgets and their agencies. And so now we really have to make the case of we took on extra work and we need extra resources because these budget cuts will only exacerbate the recovery efforts, particularly for low-income communities. So I'll give you one example where it really ties in specifically. And Jeff talked about in the last COVID relief package, there was the education emergency funding. Exactly, he's on point. And I want to talk about the elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund, because under that, there was funding eligible for educational related activities designated by governors who they seemed as essential for carrying out emergency education service, providing childcare and early childhood education, providing social and emotional support, and protecting education-related jobs, right? It sounds to me that this is what Parks and Recreation agencies were doing, right?
That's right.
So we just have to now make the case to these elected officials to say, hey, we were doing these things. We are eligible for this funding and we need this funding. And it's very important. And to that end, NRPA has really been working in tandem with our organizational partners and our coalition partners to put together these toolkits that can help folks become comfortable with making such an ask from their local elected officials. At the national level, the opportunities do continue, as Jeff said. I mean, we have been really pushing for expanded SNAP and summer food program reimbursement for park and recreation agencies. But there's also clean water and state revolving fund that can provide for green energy, green infrastructure improvements. We're also talking about community development block grants, which are going to be important. There's the ORLP, which Jeff mentioned. We're looking to really not only permanently authorize that program, but make sure that it has a one-time investment of 500 million to really be able to help out. There's, of course, the LWCF program. And, we're looking at also, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Youth Mentorship Program, which will be important.
Yes.
All of the community support, because once this pandemic ends, there will be other challenges that will come up. The opioid epidemic hasn't really gone away. It's still there. And, there's going to be a lot of mental health and wellness challenges that we're going to face. And we need training for those particular challenges that are coming up ahead. So we're looking to really figure out how we can embed these particular programs, not only in legislation that's happening, but once they become programs, how do we really make a case for stronger appropriations so that that money flows down to the local level and we can be taking advantage of it by providing folks with the right tools and resources to be able to make a stronger case for accessing those funds.
Elvis, I'm glad you really brought up some details here, because you and Jeff and Donald are hitting on so many aspects of our even next show with 3 directors that will be able to give details on some of these aspects that you're talking about. I mean, we're already locked and loaded, ready to go, because we've got a system here. There's a method to the madness. So stay tuned on that. Thank you, Elvis. And I want to turn it over to Todd. Todd, your sport is so dimensional. You're at every level, from amateur to professional sports, the US Open, but also to that local grassroots. But what is amazing with tennis, the reason we brought you all on is one, you affect so many millions of people, but you've had 4 million new players in this last year with this pandemic. Now, that's an influx on several million you're already serving. And I really want to turn it over, because I'm not sure people realize the resources you all have. Todd, take us away.
No, absolutely. Well, first off, Don, Elvis, Jeff, do you have any openings this afternoon? Let's definitely talk. I'm ready to talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Yes. And thanks, Jody and Anne-Marie for bringing us in here. So you're right. I mean, that was the first thing I was going to talk about, was the good news, our own good news in tennis, which is the 22% increase of 4 million players that came into the game. I mean, it's unreal. And if you think about it, it's really the physical distancing, right, of the sport. It's the health benefits, the wellness pillar, of NRPA as well, and just the fun with friends and family and so on. So So we're really looking forward to taking kind of next steps in that capacity. But even above and beyond that, think about the number of public park play, right? So of the 4 million, I would say easily 60–70% of them played in public parks. So now we're talking infrastructure, right? Now we need a place to kind of maintain and keep those. So our next question was, okay, how are we going to retain all of these players, keep these players active, keep these communities health and wellness wise active? So don't tell anyone. We haven't told this to the public yet, so hopefully no one's listening.
You're hearing it here.
Yeah, you're hearing it here first. But we do have an upcoming grant initiative that's going to be rolled out in the next few weeks. It's really focused on introductory type programs for youth and adults. And it's really focused with the public parks. Because I don't know about you, if I tried rock climbing by myself, I'm not going to have success. But if I have someone kind of helping me through that process, in an introductory type program, I think I might enjoy it a little bit better. So a few other areas that we can really, we have supported and we can support others as well is really our USTA network, right? So it's very similar to the park structure. So we have, national. So we have an office here in Orlando, then up in White Plains. We have sections, so 17 sections. They're separate entities with staff and full support to grow the game of tennis. Then we have districts. Some of those have districts. And then there's 650 community tennis associations, and those are nonprofits. So, now we're talking at every level, we have a great connecting point with all the parks and a great in-house insight when it comes to tennis. And I know we are the Tennis Association, but I also want to throw out that, we're also supporting racket sports as we go through this. So I know it's a big topic as we move forward. And then even at the district and delivery level, we have the coaches, right? So there's free training for coaches that's done through our sections and our districts and so on. Curricula, that's free. Background checks, that's a priority. We want to protect our kids. We know a number of parks already do that, but just in case, there's another safety valve there. And then finally, really kind of the biggest piece, just at least with this question here, is our facility services. So we're really, we've given out over $15 million since 2005, really supporting the infrastructure of public parks. So it's about 2,300 park sites is who we've supported. So if you kind of look at the budgets these days, before these the grants are coming out, budgets have been cut and hit pretty hard when it comes to capital expense and maintenance. So we're still helping and supporting, not financially at this time. We've had to put a little freeze on that right now. But really, we're talking about 25,000 to 30,000 tennis courts, really to open up that accessibility, to all levels and resource, type individuals. And then through those services, there's the technical expertise. So we have civil engineers, we have design. We basically are co-authored of the court construction book, right? So the book that every contractor uses, we actually author that. So we're here to kind of help meet everyone where they're at with resurfacing to whatnot, as far as, reviewing bids and, even connecting to various contractors out there. Advocacy efforts. So again, going to those racket sports, which is huge. And then the business, right? So now the cities and the parks are investing all this money into building a new facility or sports complex. Well, what happens if you get a roaming tennis pro that, excuse me, just teaches one person every single day, right? Now the place is dead. It's not making the impact that you need. So we have a services group that will come in, help with those business models, find RFPs to third parties and concessionaires and so on, P&L statements and that. So, we're really trying to, we're really here meeting you wherever you're at, as far as park agencies go, and just, see how we can make an impact and develop our communities, health and wellness wise.
Well, I'll tell you, Todd, we want to bring you on as a model and a delivery system, because we've had so many questions about sports and the sports industry. And you all have been leading in this area with grants. You've been leading with resources. My gosh, I don't think people realize you're offering free design services and technical help free of charge. You will literally do their parks, court systems, and even help as the overall master planning. And I just don't believe people realize that other sports are doing this too. But I thought we ought to bring you on because you've seen one of the most dynamic increases in play in all sports. So again, thank you so much for that information. Anne Marie, it's time for poll.
It is time for a poll. So let's go ahead and launch this one. This is a multiple choice poll, and we want to hear from you in the audience. We'd like to know, where have you received funding from in the past 3 years? Park foundations, private foundations, suppliers or manufacturers, grant resources, individual bequests, other human resources, trade associations, or friends group. So you can vote for as many as you have. There's also, government funding and other. And other would also incorporate, if you haven't received funding in the last 3 years, go ahead and check other. That's kind of a bucket. If you have received them from somewhere that isn't listed there, put that in the chat for us, just so that we're aware of what other means to you. We'd love to hear that. So we'll let this go a couple more minutes. We've got a lot of voting going on. Everybody's still voting pretty crazy there and starting to slow down. So we will give it 3, 2, and 1. And we'll go ahead and end the poll and share that with you. Government funding, no surprise, number 1. Grant resources, individuals and bequests and private foundations also strong, and also park foundations. So really good information there from everybody. For other, I see Scott said USTA, so that's awesome. And we'll go ahead and stop sharing that one. We've got a couple more for you later on in the show, but right now I'm going to turn it back to Jody for another question for our panel.
Fantastic. You all have given some great examples of proven funding and resources opportunities for our communities. And I can guarantee you, some of our colleagues in the audience today are wondering, where do I begin? What if an agency has never obtained or has limited working knowledge in developing a foundation or a friends group? How do they get started? And Jeff, I'm gonna start with you on this one.
Okay, thank you, Jody. That's a great question. And let me start just from a Trust for Public Land perspective. We operate in communities across the country. So if a local parks department has an existing relationship with the Trust for Public Land locally, that's a great place to start. We have resources there that can help you. We're also engaged in a partnership with NRPA and the Urban Land Institute around something called the 10-Minute Walk Mayor's Campaign. This is a place where a mayor makes a pledge to put more people within a 10-minute walk of a park. We're trying to flow resources, both financial resources and technical resources, through that vehicle to local governments to be able to try to access funds and access technical support to get things done. So I really encourage people to look at the 10minutewalk.org website. I think that one of the things that concerns us at the Trust for Public Land is that there's a high risk that with lots of funding available for local parks, that they will be unequitably distributed. That is, wealthy parks departments that have a lot of staff, a lot of technical expertise. There are big cities that have their own lobbying arms and have people on working Capitol Hill, will have the ability to access all these resources where poor communities, neighborhoods won't have that access. At PPL, we're actually in our field programs sort of biased toward hiring community organizers, people who will actually work with the community. And we've developed something called the Equitable Communities Fund, seeking philanthropic support that we can get to local communities to try to give them enough capacity to be able to play in this sort of financial economic marketplace to get resources into those kinds of communities that have been excluded from that in the past. So yeah, I guess I would say the final thing there is, and I noted this in the answer to the last question, is we're also trying to develop the capacity to actually have grant writers who can work with local parks departments and local city agencies in order to try to access these funds, because it's not easy. And we recognize that. And the barrier of just having the sort of technical oomph to be able to access those funds is a real barrier. So I think across all those, the final one, this is a shout out to Donald, is that, you know, it really helps to have money to get money, and very modest amounts of money coming through a Parks Foundation can be leveraged 10, 20 times in order to try to access those funds. So really that ability to have a friends group, to have a local Parks Foundation, NRPA, PPL, Donald's group, all of those groups can help you set those things up in order to access those funds.
You know, Jeff, I just was so thrilled when you were available to come on here, because you literally dive down into that local community with your work. But I'll tell you, TPL has been on the forefront of every aspect of making adjustments to help even that smallest community. So you help the largest urban, but you have been right there. And thank you so much, because you know what? All communities and all parks are important. And you totally have embraced that. And thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Jody. But what you see on this panel here is an ecosystem of organizations that, you know, really believe in this stuff. And it's a critical group.
Well, it is. And I'll tell you, Elvis, we have you back to back with Jeff on this question, because obviously I've been with you over 40 years and I've been on your board and I've been your president of a past president of NRPA. I can just tell you right now, NRPA has stepped up to the dial and to the call every time. Elvis, take it away on this one. This is right down your line. Up, you're on mute.
Hey.
We love our live show. It's awesome.
No, thank you. Absolutely. Now, I have to tell you, no, it's absolutely important for us to be able to grow that ecosystem, right? Bring in the resources that can, you know, provide additional opportunities. You know, one of the things we're really making a concerted effort on is taking advantage of helping legislators understand the important role that parks play in communities, right? Sometimes, you know, there was a lesson I learned when I worked in government. I learned it. I was at a meeting at the White House and they said, oh, USDA is like the A student. And sometimes you don't realize that the A student is struggling. And I would characterize that Parks and Recreations are the A students, right? Because when everything else shut down, Parks and Recreations not only remained open, but they expanded services. And so one would think, oh, they're not struggling, when in reality, we know that our agencies are struggling. And so making sure that legislators understand the needs of park and recreation agencies is important. And so we have this concerted advocacy effort to be able to let them know that as they are developing grant programs, that parks and recreations can be eligible for those, because we touch upon every aspect of life, right? And so we definitely are not only focused on helping legislators understand that, we're also focused on helping government officials learn that. With this change of administration, we're really taking an opportunity to reach out to government agencies and things we wouldn't think of, right? You know, we had mentioned before that transportation provides some critical programs that we may not be taking advantage of. So number one, how do we reach out and let them know what Parks and Recreation are doing, especially when we're talking about this large infrastructure economic recovery package, green infrastructure, trails, that's going to be important, right? Climate change, right? If we're looking at, really reimagine how we're looking at transportation, Parks and Recreation are at the center of that. And so we are there to educate. When we're talking to Health and Human Services about the social programs we provide and the prevention programs we provide, we're really helping them have an expanded understanding of what Parks and Recreation offer so that Park and Recreation agencies have better pathways to access those particular funds, have the resources. Because having worked in government, I know that sometimes you're one person handling a whole nation in terms of a grant program.
Exactly.
You need assistance. And so taking it from that perspective is how can we help, provide federal funding, a better understanding and better pathway to be able to help. And so that's a major role that we're playing in our ecosystem and working with our partners to also bring in, philanthropic as well as, private sector dollars that can help out with like matching funds whenever there's programs that require matching funds. And so we're really excited because we really believe that it's a unique time. And one of our park directors from East Goshen, Pennsylvania said it best. He said, our time is now.
Yes.
Jason Lang,
Yeah.
I agree with him. Our time is now, and we really have to, take advantage of this opportunity to turn this public appreciation into political goodwill that will turn into the resources that can help advance these important community vital programs and benefits that Park and Recreations provide.
And that's what this group is doing. You are opening that door so our local departments and communities can walk through that door. And that's why we have to keep communicating like we are today and keep opening that door. Thank you, Elvis, for doing that. And again, Jeff, it's amazing what TPL is doing, but it's all of us together. Todd, give us your input on this one because you've been right there too.
Definitely. Thank you for that. It's been interesting just how this has morphed kind of throughout the years, and you've been right with us here, Jody, on this. We can look at it straight from the programming perspective, right? Kind of down at the grassroots on the court with the kids and the adults and that type of thing. But as we've kind of approached this, we've looked at the overall delivery and the management structure of these agencies. And, we said, we've got some pretty good expertise in this world, right? So, or in this area. So let's, so we've created an assessment tool,
Yes.
a park and municipality tennis assessment tool. It's basically 4 modules. We have the management piece to it. So, how do you have concessionaires? Do you have in-house staff? How many? And do you have them at every location? Is there similar, coaches? Are they all trained correctly and so on? So, so we have a full assessment of that. And then down to the specifics that all these agencies manage. We do assessments with the 3 other modules. So one would be the programming, right? So if you have little Joey coming in to play, elementary PE, okay, well, how do we get Joey to an after-school program and then advance kind of throughout that process to, basically take advantage of the sport that they love, right? So that's what we do. We assess that, and if it's, if Joey's able-bodied, or maybe he's wheelchair, maybe he has some intellectual disabilities as well, let's give them the tools that are needed to make sure that's successful. The third one would be, community impact, right? So, what's the diversity? What's the equity piece, right? How do we help those under-resourced communities and give them the tools and, move around your resources to have a full delivery program offering, or I guess a portfolio of those programs as well. And then finally, as kind of our bread and butter here is the facility piece, right? The bricks and mortar of each of these sites. So We can do an assessment of each of these sites, look at the amenities, wheelchair accessibility, how's the courts, the lights, and so on. And all of these modules, they have numbers backing this up with a status. So when we come back with these recommendations for the agencies, we have backing of that data and content. So we're excited. We're just on the outskirts of a pilot. We hit city of Aurora, Colorado, Denver, Orlando, Portland, and a few others that are already kind of we're working through here. And I'll tell you, we couldn't do it with our local family, right? The sections and the districts that have the knowledge there locally. So they're in big support of this. So that's one big key piece that we'd love to offer that expertise to anyone listening. And then the other piece to it, obviously, is let's sit down, because in Aurora we had that conversation about pickleball. All right, well, let's talk through this. So let's come up with a solution. I know if tennis competes with pickleball and vice versa, no one's going to win, right? So let's kind of figure out how this works and what fits best with each situation there. And then Jody, you mentioned the master planning, right? So that's another key piece. So when you have these master plans, give us a ring. We'll come in and provide the insight with the racket sports as well. And then on the digital side, which is really exciting, is we have this tool called Serve Tennis. And it basically is an online reservation system, registration system for programming, contact management system. Our tournaments would be on that. And we're driving consumers to that location, to that site. So to help kind of lift up your programs, so they'll have more eyes taking a look at that and impact those communities. So that's what I have there.
Wow. I tell you, I want to emphasize, because we have every size delineation of size department on this show. I mean, we have hundreds of colleagues that are viewing this and thousands that view this later on the podcast. I got to tell you right now, you serve the smallest community. I've seen you serve the smallest all the way to the largest community. So again, another example of just one major entity in this country that's trying to give back locally. And this tennis assessment is a major tool for future funding and assessing where you need to find some dollars. So thank you, Todd, so much. And Donald, take us home on this one.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the input from the other panelists as well. Just to kind of dovetail, what we have found with the National Association of Park Foundations, especially through this pandemic, is that more and more people have had to realize the importance of being outside, of getting into our local parks. That's all been awesome. And I'm not certain exactly how many millions more people have used our local parks for recreation and for family enjoyment and such. But the downside of it is there's so many more eyes now that are open to the need areas of our local park, the rebuilding or the refurbishing, or the questions that might come up as to how is it that our local park department, agency, or district has allowed this tennis court to go bad, or this walkway around our local lagoon to need replacement, and what can we do about it? Well, one of the things that has evolved is not just in this pandemic, but over the years, over the last 10, 15, 20 years or so, is more and more need for partnership between parks and recreation and the world of philanthropy. Right. So what we have done with the National Association of Park Foundations is provide our citizens and volunteers who are excited about contributing to their local parks an opportunity to be part of the solution. We will help them understand the process of starting their own local friends group or local park foundation. We'll give them the understanding of what it takes to be recognized as a nonprofit corporation in the state in which they're in. We will give them an opportunity to understand the nuances of how to get the 501c3 designation by the IRS, not just the benefits of it, but
Mhm.
how to navigate through the application processes and such.
Exactly.
And while that's happening, while the IRS might and the Secretary of State in the state might be analyzing their applications, we're working with these groups to help them in the need areas that they have told us they have. The need areas of how do we raise funds? How do we govern our board? How do we get more relevant within our community? And as a resource that really gets to the local level, we've been able to provide those solutions.
Well, Donald, that's why we had you, the very final speaker on this question, because you bring it all together and you are there from day one. You are willing to help them get their friends group going, get their foundation going. I have been a part of this. I've listened to other foundations on calls with you all, and you literally will go to the nth degree to help them get started. And that's, and every size community. I was on the other day, all of you, I just want you to know, I was on a call and they were, foundation was trying to raise $15,000. It doesn't matter the amount. This association will help you with any type of raising the funds, along with all of our guests on here. That's the teamwork. That's the critical teamwork. All right, Anne-Marie, we are ready for 2 more poll questions from our audience.
All right, let's do it. So audience, we want to hear from you. We want to understand where you see the challenges. So this next question is, our department's biggest challenge in securing funding is finding time to research and apply, finding the right resources to fund our needs, the actual grant writing or application process, preparing the necessary reports. Sorry, that one's on there twice. Only vote for it once. Sometimes Zoom does that with the answers. Small staff with too many competing priorities, or something else. And again, if your biggest challenge is something else, we invite you to write that in the Q&A just so that we can hear from you on that. But different departments, different resources, different skill sets. So a lot of different challenges that are out there. So we're just kind of interested to hear a little bit more about what you think your biggest challenge is. And again, we get all of our ideas for future shows from you guys. So I can't tell you how much we appreciate your taking part and participating in the show with these polls, because it's great information. All right, so we're going to give this one just a few more seconds. We'll end it in 3, 2, 1. And let's take a look at our responses. So there you go. Finding the right resources, to fund our needs. And we hear that a lot. There was already a couple of questions that we've seen about specific projects that people are trying to fund. So I know that's certainly can be challenging. And then finding the time, especially now, I know that especially if you're a smaller department, right? Finding that time to be able to do the work necessary to research the right grant and apply for that. So no surprises. And we thank you very much for sharing on that. And we're going to go to our next question here real quick. And this one talks about the industry. So in your mind, within Park and Recreation, what do you think the biggest funding deficiency is right now? Is it funds for land acquisition, for capital expenditures, for operation and maintenance, for programming and services, or for staff hiring, training, and support? So, especially with some of you saying in the last one, the majority of you actually saying in the last one that finding the right resources, where do you think that big funding deficiency is? A lot of voting going on in this one. I can see a lot of passionate people out there. And this is, this is a single choice. So we really want to know, if you had to pick just one of these, what would you say the biggest deficiency is? So we're going to give you a couple more seconds here. We'll end this one in 3, 2, 1. We'll go ahead and end it and share the results with you. And there you go, operations and maintenance.
Yeah.
So that is true. It's difficult to find ones. Capital expenditures right behind that as the second most popular choice. So some great information from you folks. And as always, we definitely appreciate your taking part in our polls. Jody, let's go back to you for the last question.
Absolutely. With the current and necessary focus of addressing equity throughout our local communities, what advisement of a couple of approaches or steps would you give our audience today to drive funding and resources to the right places of creating community-wide equitable access to parks, facilities, and programs? This is the best, one of the best groups to ask. Elvis, kick us off.
First, I'm going to go off mute, and I did it right this time. So
Perfect.
teaching old dog new tricks, I guess.
Oh, we love you.
So, this is really important because, this whole legacy of equity is an important national aspect that we have to handle. I mean, there's generations and generations of inequitable treatment that certain communities have had to deal with. And so to think that we are going to, take care of it in one generation it's not the right thinking. It's really thinking about the long game and taking the important steps to, put down the right roots to be able to lead communities in new directions, provide them those resources, build a pipeline of leaders who have the understanding, the resources, and the connections to be able to bring those resources. To say, yes, we're going to solve it in X amount of years. No, it's this long-term commitment that we all have to make. And so I think an important step is to really look within your own house and to look at how much do we understand equity. And this is something at NRPA that we have taken very seriously. And we brought in some consultants to really help us along that journey. And we've dedicated resources, we dedicated time to understanding it. Because if we are looking to, better the situation, it really begins with having a firm understanding of it. And it's really peeling back the onions on some ugly chapters of our nation's history and looking at these implicit biases that we're not aware of. These are our blind spots. And I think once you do that, it's bringing the right partners together and bringing the right communities together. I mean, one of the ways we're really tackling this is, looking at we've providing grant opportunities that are allowing park access and environmental resilience and health, different groups to be able to come together, right? We're looking to fund 6 to 10 communities from 300,000 to 500,000 for the next 3 years to be able to advance community-driven system-level strategies that can create equitable park access to improve environmental resilience and health for communities, because these are part of that, challenge that we have. And we're looking at park and recreation mentorship for rural youth impacted by opioids, right? It's looking at the community wellness hub model, which we've been working with the Walmart Foundation to provide communities all across the countries on how can we be bringing these communities together? How can we be providing the technical assistance and training? But more importantly, how can we create an environment where people are comfortable talking about these difficult subjects, are comfortable understanding each other? We're never going to think alike, but we have to respect our differences and knowing where we have to help each other grow. I think in doing that, we are laying down some of those important pathways and routes to be able to take that next generation to handle those particular issues, right? If my kids are handling my problems, I haven't done things right. They're going to handle a different set of problems. So as a parent, and I can only take it so far so that they're handling less than I have, right? It's I think, an important aspect to look at this equitable framework moving forward.
Well, you've been on the forefront of this, and thank goodness. And so everyone listen up. They're starting with larger communities, but it'll lead to even smaller communities. But you got to start somewhere. You got to have that model, and you're working on that. Thank you so much. Todd?
Well, I'll tell you, the first thing that comes to mind from USTA is really our USTA Foundation. Our foundation, we have this wonderful program called National Junior Tennis and Learning. It was founded by the great Arthur Ashe in the 70s. And we have 250 of these nonprofit youth development organizations. And what they do, they offer either free or low cost tennis and education programs. there's about 160,000 under-resourced youth that make up this full network. So, you know, every organization, all of these NJTLs, they're clearly vetted. You know, they have quality programs as well. And in fact, you know, they're basically housed out where the children are, right? So they're not kind of tucked away in a certain area. They go out to where the kids are, which is the public parks, right? So about 1,900 sites, public park sites, are used by these NJTLs. So if anyone listening is interested, you know, I'll connect you with that NJTL local group. And a great example would be in Houston. USTA Texas has worked for years with the Houston Tennis Association, and then the Houston Parks Association with Emily Schaefer. She's their director there. And basically they have one of the largest NJTL organizations in the country. So they have about 30 to 38 sites that they run during the summer. So that's a great example, just, you know, kind of showing that connection. And again, as I think the theme of today is the partnerships and the connections that we're all together. And I think this is a great opportunity for us. So if anyone's, you know, my door is always open, so feel free to reach out.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned the foundation and the great work that that foundation is doing, because not only do NJTLs teach individual development and extension of a person's learning, but also they teach team. They talk about all team sports and all about team playing within the tennis system. So I want to also shout out for Sloane Stevens, her mom, all the other, you know, Zena Garrison and Kristine Cat Adams. I mean, so many are so involved with NJTL. So again, thank you so much for pointing out that great work of the foundation. Donald, your turn on this one.
Well, thank you so much. You know, I recall in the opening how I mentioned an accessible program that we have developed through Game Time and Play Core partnership. But it goes much deeper. This issue actually goes much deeper than just access for all, right? Like play for all. As Albus had mentioned, you know, we do need to find ways to celebrate our differences. Find ways to celebrate the things that we all enjoy, regardless of you know, where we come from, so to speak. And you know, it's exciting for us to be able to advocate for it, especially at the foundational level, advocate for conversations that include meaningful comments from everyone across the population in certain communities and in membership areas. You know, we talk about and are incorporating the inclusive issue and discussion in all of our educational opportunities that we provide to our citizens and volunteers and even the park professionals who are trying to navigate through how to best leverage their park foundations and the friends groups that they're working with. You know, the opportunity to be able to share information at our park foundation school that happens in August. The opportunity to incorporate this type of conversation and educational level in webinars and you know, special educational learning events. These are all things that are high on our list because they need to be discussed and they need to be talked about, and they strengthen us from within. That's another part of it all.
You know, I want to give a compliment because when you all started, I remember Joe Wins. He's the former director of Indianapolis, and Joe called everyone up and we all got in a room, and wasn't it great discussion that we talked about Park Foundation? I'll never forget that discussion. And we were working with Step Up to Health with NRPA. Oh my gosh, what a moment of reckoning and really bringing us all up to speed and learning about, and really, you know, calling us up on equity, and we're finally getting there. We are going to get there. And I just want to finish up because Jeff, TPL, you addressed it earlier in the show. Please tell us your views on this.
Thanks, Jody. First of all, I just want to endorse the three other panelists. That was a really impressive set of views, and I think dead on. You know, parks and equity have been entwined forever. You know, go back and read Olmsted. He was talking about the role parks play in society. But the past year has really shown more than ever the role that parks can play in creating an equitable society. It's Trust for Public Land. We've identified 4 outcomes of our work: building community, building equity, building climate resilience, building public health. And the theme that's through all those is really equity. I mean, public health is an equity issue. Climate resilience is an equity issue. And so, you know, in light of that, this year we've hired our first equity director to really help all of our programs across the country understand how we are or are not delivering equitable results. And we're not alone. I mean, the other 3 organizations represented here, parks departments across the country, are all struggling with how to do that. Another thing that the TPL is doing that I think is important is we have a shop, our research and innovation shop, which really is about crunching big data for things like park planning. We're really turning that to building equitable park plans, working with departments across the country to understand how they're making investments, how they're building out their parks departments in a way, what the impacts of equity, impacts on equity, and how they might turn to a more equitable set of solutions. You all know we publish an annual park score ranking. It's going to have equity measures this year as we try to really try to find a way to, again, just bring a spotlight to issues of equity. You all know this just as well as I do. Everybody on this call understands this. But the most important thing that we've found is find ways to include the community in decision making. The more we can open up the doors in our decision making to bring all members of the community in, it's the critical first step. It's necessary but not sufficient to really make sure that we're delivering, you know, equitable investments across a community. And we're seeing that across the country and trying to develop more and more tools to allow people to be able to do that in an efficient way. This is the big challenge for our field, I think, over the next few years. But it's a challenge I'm confident we can deliver. And since this is, I think, kind of the wrap up, you know, I want to go back to Elvis's point. I've stolen a line from Elvis. You know, in the past year, parks have been there for people, and people need to be there for parks. And you know, one of the things that parks can really deliver, if we can get the resources, is equity, is equitable access to all kinds of benefits. And so I'm just very, very encouraged to hear what my panelists are saying, what I'm hearing across the country, that this is going to be a vital role for our entire field.
Absolutely. And, you know, I just want to reiterate, you know, Billie Jean told me a long time ago, pressure is a privilege. The pressure of what we're all doing, whether it's foundations, finding funding, developing plans, whatever, it's a privilege to do it. It is a privilege to address this topic. We are so lucky to be in this position today because parks can lead in this area. And you have all addressed it with this question. Thank you for addressing it, but we have only begun and we will make this happen. Right now, we need to go to audience questions. Anne Marie, it's back to you.
Sounds good. And we have just had a lot of outpouring of love from the audience. Peg, Lisa, Kevin all said thank you for all this information that you've given us. Love this quote from William, who said, wow, steps toward a more equitable framework. Thank you all for the work you're doing to bring about the flourishing of our communities, especially for underserved populations. So I echo that. Thank you guys. So much good information today. I want to share this question because this is something that, you know, we hear a lot from small communities who are always telling us, this doesn't apply to me. I don't have a big department. You need to focus on small communities somewhat. And so I want to address this question from a small community. And it is, what do you recommend as good first steps for someone who has never applied for funds? I'm a small department and will likely be solely responsible. So what information can you give to this person?
You know, I'll have to say this because we get that question a lot. And I'll say that fear and overwhelm can be paralyzing. So I totally understand where you're coming from. But you really have to tackle this by reaching out to the orgs that exist. One of the pleasures of being here today is being part of this ecosystem, in that we're exemplifying that there are many resources that are available to park and rec agencies. So one of the practices I always do when I get scared and paralyzed by fear is I write down every question that I don't know the answer to. Usually it's a couple of pages, and then I go back and then I figure out who can help me answer this question, right? And so I would encourage you, because there's questions that NRPA can handle. There's questions that TPL can handle. There's questions that, the Council on Foundations can handle. There's questions that, the Tennis Association can handle this. And so you basically are able to bring those resources to the table. And you find that once you have those answers, you have a path forward. So, help us help you, right? How can we be here to answer your questions and help you attain what you need to attain? We're your partners in this, so don't be shy about reaching out to us.
Well, and
I
also,
just wanna-
I just want to mention something real quick here. That's kind of an extension of this question, Anne-Marie. Lucy Smith brought up, I don't get federal funds. I don't get state funds, but really, there are access with county funds. She's in an unincorporated area. So this is a small community, small question of a small department. Bottom line is, I was a city county parks director of an intergovernmental agency. We were very small when we started. We were very large when we ended up finishing and I retired. Honestly, you do have access, and I wanted to let Lucy know, to county funds. So you are part of that county, and in an unincorporated area, they should be able to help you. So that just drives home what Elvis is saying. Go to your county and ask them to help you. Okay, back to you, Anne-Marie. Sorry about that. And Jeff, did you have a comment?
No, let's push forward.
Okay.
Awesome. That was our our panelists did such a great job today of answering the questions during the show. So that was our big question. But I also wanted to share some good news too from the recent surveys. A really great share.
Yeah.
Allison Carpenter shared with us on the last survey that the Detroit Riverwalk has been named the #1 Riverwalk in the country by USA.
Wow.
So shout out to you, Detroit.
Wow.
Congratulations. And thanks, Allison, for sharing that good news with us. And keep your news coming. On the survey, there's a question asking if you have a good news in park story to share. So just tell us, what the good news is happening in your departments and communities, along with your name and where you're from, so we can keep that good news coming from everybody. So we're super excited about that. And I'm going to share with you so that you can see what's coming up on our next show, which will be in May 13th is the next one. And look at those guests. I mean, super excited. Like
Wow.
Joe said, we've got some great directors, future planning and programs ahead. I think we all want to know what future plans and programs are going to look like with all the, uncertainty, but things are opening up. And so a lot of things going on right now in the industry. So we're super excited to hear that. Also, this is really cool. You see that QR code right there? You can take your phone right now and you can scan it. If you're anxious for that survey to get your CEUs, we wanted to make that available for you. The survey will be coming from SurveyMonkey within, a day or so. I think the team gets it all out to you. But if you're excited to do that right now, you can go ahead and scan that QR code and take the survey right away as soon as the show ends. So Jody, I'm going to take it back to you to close this out.
Well, I just want to say to all of our panelists, we needed you. You stepped up. You didn't miss a beat when I asked you to come on. And thank you so much. And we'll come back to you in the future because, again, you shared so much information, but from the heart, we needed you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Great job, you guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And Anne-Marie, way to drive the 747 today. You do this endless. It's amazing. Thank you.
That's right. And for any other panelists that want Zoom lessons, we can talk about that after the show. We will see you guys in May. And again, to our panel, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules
Thank you.
to share your news with everybody. We appreciate you all and what you're doing so much. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Have a great Earth Day, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.